Back to Darts News Weekly. Delighted to be joined by Samuel Gill once again. Interesting 4 days of darts. Good to see that we've both made it intact through the Thursday session without never wanting to watch darts again. But a great 4 days over the border, and probably the last 4 days we're going to see a darts crowd for quite a long time, unfortunately. But Peter Wright, the victor at the 2020 European Championships. And, I couldn't disagree with the win, to be honest. Can you, Sam?
Not really. I think I even said last week that a winner would potentially come out of that game between Wright and Price. And yeah, it came to fruition. Price didn't do a lot wrong in that game. Wright was just exceptional. But the way Wright in the final, he hit 100 out. Over 102 average in every single game, barring one, where he hit 102 average. And in that game against Wade in the final, when he took out 148 and 125 in a row to win the title, was just exquisite. And for Wade, he couldn't do anything. Like, as much as Wade played brilliant over the weekend, and we'll go on to that. For me, it was a bit of a surprise, really, the Wright one, especially like we said last week. A bit like the Gary Anderson dilemma we always have. Would he actually play well when he came back? Because, of course, he hasn't played since the Premier League finals night, where he wasn't the best and played quite poorly. And so, yeah, it's one of those, really. If he did drive all the way to Oberhausen, he had a very good trip. It was worth the trip over then to drive all the way from the UK to Germany. But, yeah, a very interesting weekend and a good 4 days. And, like you say, a potential final 4 days with crowds up until potentially the World Championships, which even then that's a doubt. So, yeah, a very good weekend overall.
Yeah, perfect weekend for Peter Wright. As you say, every average was over 102 mark over the weekend, and he was never really in danger. Johnny Clayton probably pushed him the closest out of everybody in the semi-finals. But as far as James Wade goes, in that final averaged, I believe, around the 96 mark, which is somewhere around what he'd been averaging for most of the tournament. And I don't think he can really complain. That's about his peak for the tournament. I mean, obviously James Wade can play better than that, but he was beaten by a better man on the night. But definitely some positive strides for James, and I'm sure he will take positives from the weekend. Despite what he says in interviews, it's a final on the TV, and he'll be happy enough for that.
It was a typical James Wade weekend, to be honest. He averaged mid-90s all weekend, 92 against Lennon, 96 against Aspinall, 98 against O'Connor, 94 against Peterson, and then, of course, 95 in the final. So he couldn't really do a lot else, really. It was just a brilliant 104 from Wright in the final to win through. And he's very much, as always in interviews, James, he never really shies away from saying that he's not playing well and, you know, he's not towards his best. But it's always this time of year where he comes good towards the World Championships. Of course, he came out of nowhere and won the Europeans and the World Series of Darts finals 2 years ago, and he went close to doing at least one half of that again this past weekend. And yeah, he played well, especially as well, considering he'd changed darts and they seemed to fly well for him. He's not known for tinkering, and he went to his new unicorn code darts, which seemed to do him well over the course of the weekend. I'd say I'm gutted as well for Devin Peterson that he couldn't win through to that major final for the first time, because I think he would have given Wright a really good go in that final, considering how well he played over the weekend. But yeah, a very good weekend for James Wade, and one that could have potentially put him into even Premier League contention at the end of the year. But who knows about that. But yeah, great weekend from Wade overall.
Yeah, we'll discuss Premier League probably next week once we've got a little bit more of an idea. We know we've both got a few names in our heads, but with Devin Peterson, it's a TV semi-final. It's his best result, in his career in an individual capacity at least, on the TV. But with Devin, you've got to say he's got a lot more to give still. And with the amount of tournaments coming up, with Grand Slam, Players' Championship finals, And of course, got the 5 floor events. Should I say, with the Winter Series. Plenty more chances for Devin Peterson to impress, and I do believe that there's a TV title in there, not too far away from Devin Peterson. Whether it's in time for the World Championships and obviously the Premier League selections, we'll have to see. But you do have to say if he or even James Wade or any outside name really is to win a TV tournament, they would be selected for the Premier League should that go ahead. The only name, of course, to miss out after winning a TV event is Paul Nicholson with the Players' Championship finals many years ago. So Devin Peterson, a semi-final, and plenty more opportunities for him. It may probably be disappointed to lose out to James Wade after playing so well at the weekend, but Devin Peterson, definitely a name that's rising, and he'll be one of those outside names you'll be looking at for the World Championship now.
Yeah, definitely. He's qualified basically for the Grand Slam of Darts now as well, with that European Tour win helping him out. And of course, Wade and Wright are already qualified. Wade through the summer series or autumn series. He's already qualified. So Peterson will get into the Grand Slam of Darts. So that's another opportunity for him, as well as, of course, the Players' Championship finals. And it'll be... At the moment, he's currently 30th seed as well for the World Championships, which of course is it's one of those with Pearson. He usually just comes through the back door and wins through a qualifier. And as we saw, we're now going to have 2 South Africans at the World Championships for the first time, which owes to Peterson's form and the fact that he doesn't have to come through these qualifiers anymore to get through. And he'll be a massive danger at the World Championships, as we know a few years ago when he saved his tour card. He knows how to play well in the Alexandra Palace stage, and especially the new and improved Devin Peterson with his brilliant throw and his 180 hit, and he's a danger for anybody. And towards the back end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised to see him win a major. And imagine that from the start of the year to the Premier League next year if he ends up getting in. For me, he suits the Premier League mould quite well as well. He's an entertainer. He's one that the fans can get behind, and compared to some players potentially who are kind of riding their luck in terms of Premier League selection at times, I think he'd be a good addition to the lineup. But of course, we've still got a long way to go. Yeah, we've still got quite a few TV events before that materialises. But yeah, the only way is up for Devin Peterson as far as I'm concerned.
One man we have to discuss, of course, is Michael van Gerwen, who was my pick to win the tournament, which fell relatively flat on its face, shall we say. My other pick actually was Danny Noppert, who you will remember lost 6-0 in the first round to Dirk van Dijvenbode. So if you're looking for predictions, you're not in the right place. But Michael van Gerwen, I mean, in that first round tie, there were signs, and the commentators were saying Michael van Gerwen is back. He got through against Darius Labanauskas, who played fairly well himself, averaged a ton, and of course lost out relatively convincingly in the end to Ian White, 10-4. In many years gone by, we may have seen, once he got a couple of legs, we may have seen Michael van Gerwen come back into that and push Ian White, obviously not experienced in the latter stages of TV events, shall we say, and pushed him into a last leg decide or further in the game at least. But 10-4 reflects quite a dominant display from Ian White, and he was the better player on the day. But the player we're focusing on is Michael van Gerwen. And what are your thoughts on his weekend, Sam?
It's like I said last week, it was too soon for him to win a title, and I was right. I still reckon PC finals for me. If he's going to come back. For me, ultimately, it was one of those. The commentators themselves ended up saying at the weekend that he's going back towards his best because he reached back-to-back finals, when in reality he went 12 games without actually hitting a ton average. And he's shown signs against James Wade on the European Tour, and this weekend even, that he is getting back towards some of his form again. But even then for me, there's still a bit of a chink in the armour for him. He still doesn't have he still doesn't have that Midas touch for me. That he can strike fear into players, and Ian White showed that this weekend, and it was kind of one of those really with Ian that people are reflecting more on Michael van Gerwen losing than Ian White's absolute remarkable display, and he was 5-0 up on Van Gerwen and absolutely cruising against him, and in years gone by, Ian potentially would have choked or bottled against Van Gerwen and almost just capitulated, but he's got those wins against Van Gerwen now, especially on like the European Tour, the Players' Championship Series, where he knows how to beat Van Gerwen. And I even said last week that in that game with White or King, both of them know how to beat Van Gerwen. Van Gerwen didn't play poorly in either game against Darius Labanauskas. Labanauskas played well, but he just couldn't hit a double and was spurting chances. Against White, he averaged 101 and still lost out. And it was kind of one of those displays where, like you say, if you look at the scoreline, you think it's a thoroughly dominant display from White. Van Gerwen had his moments and played really well, but he lost out to the better man, and he even said that himself. For White, it was a bit of a shame, really, because he suffered the Van Gerwen /Taylor / any player who's world number one and the best player in the world curse when he ended up losing to Devin Peterson, where Devin ended up averaging 106 against him in 110-6. So it could have been one of those weekends for White. White could have finally fulfilled his destiny on the TV, but even then, there's some good signs from White over the weekend that he's playing really well after quite a barren spell. He nearly didn't even qualify for the European Championships, which it's not like him. And he even admitted in an interview post-match with I think with yourself that on the post-match press conference that he needs to start hoovering up on these TV tournaments. He needs to be playing well, because ultimately there's not going to be all these European tours, there's not going to be all these Players' Championship events that he can go on and win, and he'll have a lot more money to defend because of that. And if he can get a few quarterfinals, semi-finals, maybe even win a TV event, he'll almost erase that money that would potentially be going onto his ranking if he was to win a European Tour or a Players' Championship and keep himself up towards the top 10. But yeah, in terms of Van Gerwen, he's not back yet for me. He's getting there. I think, like I say, Players' Championship finals, World Championship time, he will still be favourite of the World Championships with a bet in. That will always happen for me. But yeah, ultimately, he's getting there, but he's not fully back yet for me.
Yeah, as you say, a good weekend for Ian White, and a good weekend in the South African qualifier as well for Cameron Carolison. I apologise if I butchered that name. Who had a 7-4 victory over Charles Losper in the final of the South African qualifier to join Devin Peterson in the World Championships. Had a good win over Graham Philby, we've seen, of course, on the TV stage before. And there's many names in there that me and yourself don't recognise, but we know there are some names that have been part of the South African World Cup teams over the year and have qualified for the Alexander Palace. So to come through that, you've got to have some quality, and it's good to add another name to the World Championship scene.
Yeah, he's quite young as well. I believe only 24 years old, which means he's still got some time to get up on that big stage, have that big stage experience. Of course, it was kind of youth versus experience there, where Charles Losper having played twice at the World Championships, albeit in 2008 and 2009. But of course, he was ultimately one of the early trailblazers for African darts before Devin Peterson was even on the scene. It's good for me to see not only Devin, but two African qualifiers at the World Championship going forward, and having this conveyor belt coming through, because ultimately it's only a good thing. And we've seen at the World Cup, whoever's been partnering Devin over recent years have been acquitting themselves quite well, and so I reckon this Carolison will be quite a handy player. Whether or not we'll see it on the big stage at the World Championships, to me it depends on if there's fans are not there, because he could be a player that, like many of the international qualifiers, playing on the floor and hitting these averages and playing and having these good performances, he could thrive without there being no fans. And of course, he'll be an unknown quantity as well for a lot of these seeded players, some of which might might only just squeeze through into the Worlds and might not be in the best form. And that goes for all the international qualifiers. And yeah, so it was good. Well, ultimately, there was quite a good entry list as well. There was quite a lot of entries, which is always good to see. And yeah, so another one to add to the list. And as we add more, we get closer to the World Championships and finalising that lineup. So yeah, all good.
Yeah, not too many more spaces to fill for the World Championship. And there's been movement in a couple of the places for the World Cup of Darts next weekend, which you discussed before we hit the record button. Unfortunately, no Harith Lim and no Paul Lim for Singapore. Of course, Paul Lim, a player that everybody loves to see, and Harith Lim really comes out to play in the World Cup and has had some terrific performances over the year, but not able to travel, unfortunately, due to the way the world is at the moment. So they've been replaced by Portugal. We spoke to Jose de Sousa over the weekend, and we knew that he was Portugal were the first reserve for that tournament. And him and a player that we've seen at Q School, Marquez. We've seen him at Q School. We haven't seen him too much more than that. They'll be filling the spot left by Singapore. And if we don't know much about Marquez, as we say, but Jose de Sousa is a dangerous player, and over a short format, was first to 5 in the first round, could be a dangerous pairing.
Yeah, I'm surprised myself that we haven't had more countries pull out. To be honest with you, it's been one of those really that I think because the Philippines have seemingly, I think they've taken a swab test, which you need to get out to basically test negative for coronavirus. They're going to be taking that either yesterday or today, depending on the time difference. So they seem to actually be heading over, which is a good thing. But yeah, for me, I think it's the next natural progression for Portuguese darts and for Jose de Sousa to go up there, not only and show himself. And as we know, he's a great player, having hit a 9-dart over the weekend as well. He can definitely hit those heights. But also to bring these other players from Portugal onto the stage, and in Marquez, we don't, again, like most players of the World Cup a lot of the time, he's an unknown quantity, but he could acquit himself really well. And they have Hungary first round as well. And so, yeah, it could be a good run for me. It's a shame really for Singapore, from what we've heard today from the Weekly Darts cast. Ultimately, Harith had taken the swab test. He was going to come over to Austria and was ready to come back and self-isolate in the government facility, which he was going to pay for himself. He was going to shell out the money to get over to Austria. But because Austria now like the UK will be in a few days' time, is now under lockdown, he can't get back to Singapore if he leaves the country. So it's not so much on the side of Paul Lim. Paul Lim's Hong Kong based. So I believe he's fine to come over to Austria. But yes, it is a massive shame. They're 2-time quarterfinalists in this event. And it makes you wonder kind of if we potentially will get one or two other countries maybe withdraw. Of course, the schedule has now been released. We now know who's going to be playing on the Friday afternoon and the Friday evening in the first round. But even then, it doesn't mean that all countries might come over unscathed. And it makes you kind of think, who are the other reserve teams that they can bring in? And it'll be good for the future in terms of Portugal for next year's tournament, in terms of who they could potentially replace and who's kind of on the chopping block next, in terms of if they put in a good display, because of course, if they continue in the same lineup, Portugal won't be in next year. So it's going to be an interesting test event, of course, without crowd as well. Now, with the European Championship being the last event with a crowd for quite some time, so that's going to be a bit of a different dynamic. Yeah,
and you have to say, if Portugal do win that first round tie, I think that pretty much confirms their qualification for next year, especially with the way that Jose is playing at the moment. And you fully expect this time next year, of course, we don't know when the World Cup's going to be played in 2021, but you'd expect him to be in and around the top 32 at the very minimum, really, for Jose de Sousa. And we obviously don't know where his partner is going to be, but I imagine if he gets the chance, he'll be over at Q School to give it another go and hopefully become the second Portuguese tour card holder. Another name that you mentioned prior to us going on air, Cristo Reyes, unfortunately not going to be involved in the tournament this time around. He's been involved for many years now in the Spain lineup alongside Tony Alcinas, who of course will be involved, thankfully. He's replaced by Jesus Nogueira. Saw him make his European a European tour debut, I believe it was, which has baffled me more than anyone that it's just his debut. But Jesus Nogueira, a very capable player. I've seen him an awful lot on the Challenge Tour. He's a very capable player, and I don't think it's going to cause Spain too many issues substituting Reyes for a player of Nogueira's quality.
For me, he's the future of Spain's World Cup team. At the moment, he's the only player virtually qualified for the World Championships. At the moment, we don't see Reyes or Alcinas at the World Championships, and you've got to think their tour cards are in danger as well towards the end of the year. I don't think Reyes has played much darts. I could be wrong, but I don't think he's played much since the lockdown, and so it hasn't 100% surprised me that he's not involved. But for me, if I was picking a pairing for Spain, I'd put Nogueira in there anyway, probably with Reyes. But of course, with Alcinas, you have a player who's been there, done it. Of course, all the way back to the first iteration of the World Cup of Darts with Carlos Rodriguez. And so, yeah, I think they're a pairing that could surprise people. Replace Jiaxing Han for China. He reached the semi-finals of the China qualifier, losing out to the event to I believe a player who's previously represented China at the World Cup. I don't know his name 100% off the top of my head. I think it's Qingyu Zhang, who he lost out to in the semi-finals. So, yeah, a player who's in a bit of recent form. And with China, as I said previously, I'm surprised they haven't have had to potentially withdraw, along with, of course, the Philippines and Japan. But if I guess if one issue's resolved with PDC Asia, all of them are resolved, and that all the teams can go over to Austria to play. But yeah, it's going to be an enjoyable World Cup despite there being no crowd, and there's some great first round ties coming up this weekend at the Salzburg Arena in Austria.
Yeah, the World Cup is one of my favourite tournaments of the year. You always get to see a few different names that you wouldn't usually get to see on the TV. And there's no exceptions this year, really. I mean, for me, the biggest surprise of everything is not seeing Australia as one of the seeded teams. Of course, it makes the draw an awful lot harder for them. Of course, seeing them make World Cup finals in years gone by. But Simon Whitlock and Damon Heta will be representing Australia this time around. And they kick off with an extremely tough first round tie. If you just let me find that one.
Republic of Ireland.
Republic of Ireland, yeah. Republic of Ireland, an extremely tough tie. I mean, Willie O'Connor and Steve Lennon. O'Connor in particular had a decent weekend at the Euros. They did extremely well last year, obviously reaching the final. And there's no reason why they can't go one better and win the tournament this year. A good, strong pairing who both seem to be on the same wavelength. And there's a few of those pairings this time around. There's a few maybe that aren't in the best of form. And you've got to say England is one of them. Michael Smith and Rob Cross. Cross in particular, you would say. If you wanted to pick a team out of a hat, for me, anyway, Rob Cross wouldn't be in the top two players, but
nope.
You know, he's the highest ranked English player going to the tournament, and that's the way the teams are picked. So he has earned his place, but whether he'll be there next year is, for me at least, in doubt.
Well, of course, he'll be defending quite a bit of money next year as well with his World Match Play and European Championship win in particular. He'll be defending that. So yeah, I think potentially going forward, we could even have the pairing of Nathan Aspinall and Michael Smith, or Nathan Aspinall and James Wade, even if he can win another major title. But yeah, for me, ultimately, I think England. But again, they were a team that people thought were in danger last year. I believe they ended up playing the Philippines last year, and lots of people laid quite a lot of bets on that the Philippines would end up winning that tie, but they didn't. And so ultimately, I think Wales are the team to beat for me. Johnny Clayton, of course, this past weekend played exceptionally well and was unlucky not to reach that final. And then, of course, we've got another new Dutch pairing. After, of course, Raymond van Barneveld's retirement, we, of course, had Jermaine Wattimena last year. We now have probably, I'd say, the most informed Dutchman at the moment in Danny Noppert, partner in Michael van Gerwen this time around. And so they could be a threat. They have the Brazil pair in first round, who have, of course, Diogo Portela and Bruno Rangel coming back into the team after a year out, I believe. Ultimately, of course, I think Austria are a team, again, to watch, but not to, in a way. They're a team that have Mensah, who's in brilliant form. We don't know what form Roby John Rodriguez is in. He can flip between being brilliant and not showing his best darts. So I think they're a team that could do well. They play USA first round. And then you're looking at, of course, tried and tested pairings like Belgium with Kim Huybrechts and Dimitri Vandenberg. Dimitri, of course, it depends on if his knee brace is still on, how well he plays. If he's got that off, we could see a good run for Belgium regardless. They have Czech Republic first round, who won't be an easy pairing. I believe Karol Sedlacek and Adam Gaulas, if I'm right, will represent the Czech Republic, who are no mugs, two quality operators. And of course, the Germany pairing, who are always interesting to watch, albeit, of course, it is in Austria, but they usually have the home crowd behind them. And Max Hopp showed some good form this past weekend, and he'll, of course, partner Gabriel Clemens this time out, and they'll get their first airing as a pair. And of course, Clemens in particular will likely take over, if he hasn't already, as Germany's number one. And so I think they could be a pairing that'll be dangerous. Of course, facing Marco Cantelé and Kim Viljanen. Of course, they're a well-known Finnish pairing. And yeah, so ultimately it's going to be a good weekend. I myself am a fan of the World Cup, but I do think it's a tournament potentially that does need a bit of a rethink. They're even saying on the commentary over the weekend, and it's been a view that's been echoed quite a bit about having pairs all the way through to the final. I think that should be the case. But I think barring that, you're looking at a potential, a perfect format and one that kind of breaks everything up, especially this time of year as well, when we have the Grand Slam, the Players' Championship final, and of course the World Championship all in a row. It's a tournament that breaks everything up and gives players the opportunity to pair with each other and take glory home. And of course, we're looking as well at Scotland as well in a brand new pairing, and of course they'll begin their title defence against Japan, who will have Seigo Asada and Yuki Yamada as their pairing this time around, and there'll be no mugs either. And with it being John Henderson and Robert Thornton instead of the formidable pairing of Gary Anderson and Peter Wright, we could see Scotland dumped out quite early, and we could even see a new champion, which knowing this year in the PDC will likely happen. But we'll soon see. I'm looking forward to this weekend, and a bit of a difference to the normal weekend of just match play or set play.
Yeah, I have to say I agree. I think Scotland are in real danger. Yuki Yamada and particularly Seigo Asada are top class players. And you have to say in many ways over the last 18 months, maybe even 2 years, have got possibly more big match experience than some of the players we mentioned, particularly Robert Thornton, who we haven't seen on TV since probably the Grand Slam last year. Don't think he qualified for the World Championship 2020. I could be wrong there. So I think over a short first to five, best of 9 format, I think Scotland could be in real trouble there. But you look along the list of names, and some of the big names in particular are really not in great form. I mean, I've mentioned the England pairing. In Northern Ireland, you've got Daryl Gurney, who's not throwing well to the heights you would expect. Kim Huybrechts has been in much better form going into a World Cup. Even Max Hopp, you look at for Germany, is not in the greatest form in the world. So there's lots of those big nations and the top 8 seeds that can really, really be shot at, especially in the opening round, with it being such a short format, as I say. And some of the unseeded nations, you mentioned the Czech Republic, Finland are an experienced pairing. And Hong Kong, of course, we don't know how much Warren Lam's been playing over over the past few months since the world changed. But Kai-Fan Lung has been playing on the Pro Tour. He's been playing plenty of darts. Looked good in the PDC Home Tour as well. And Hong Kong are a team that I would genuinely be looking at to reach the latter stages, possibly the final day of action at this year's World Cup. But we do have one more thing to cover, and it's a thing that we're not particularly famed for here on Darts News Weekly, and that is a prediction. My predictions last week were dire, to say the least. I'm going to go first, and I'm not going to stick my neck out at all, because I'm going to go with Wales. Gerwyn Price, best player in the world at the moment. I think that's difficult to argue against rather. And then Johnny Clayton made a semi-final at the weekend. Looks in the best shape he's been in for quite a while in terms of darts. So for me, Wales are going to win the World Cup. Sam?
I tend to agree with you for one of only a few times. They've got Russia for. To be fair though, with Wales, they've got Russia first round. Who I believe it. Yeah, it will be Boris Koltsov as usual, alongside Alexei Kadov. Excuse the pronunciation, but and then they'll play. They're in quite a rough section of the draw, to be honest, because then you have Ireland, Australia, Poland, and South Africa also in that quarter. The team that we haven't really spoken about is Krzysztof Ratajski and Krzysztof Kachuk for Poland, who have South Africa first round, and that'll be a good game in my opinion if Devin's on as well. And in Ratajski and Kachuk, you have two Pro Tour players, two players who have shown good form. Especially Ratajski, and is a good pairing in my opinion, compared to Titus Karnik, as of course partnered Krzysztof before, and for me they could go on a good run. But yeah, Wales at the moment for me are the standout pairing. Johnny Clayton of course showed his form this past weekend and kind of came out of nowhere for me for that run. Hasn't really played that great this year, but ended up showing at the European Championship that there's fight in the ferret. But yeah, then you've got, for me, Netherlands as well. Can be, it'd be typical Michael van Gerwen to claim his first TV title in a while this weekend, and they've got a pretty kind draw. They're in the bottom section, so they'll have Brazil first round, then potentially Italy or Spain. You're potentially looking at Spain coming through that with Nogueira and Alcinas, and then from there in the other section of the draw, compared to them, you've got Germany and Finland, and then you've got Sweden and Greece. So for me, you're potentially looking at Wales or the Netherlands for me this weekend to come through. I think England go out. I'm going to stick my out and be a prediction that a lot of people have. I reckon if Ilagan and Malik then can get to Austria unscathed, pass the COVID test and get on that stage, I reckon they end up dumping out England in the first round. Cross has not been playing well enough for me. Smith has been playing well, and if Cross isn't in the best form, Smith will have to anchor that team. And it's all about hitting the doubles in the key moments to help your team out. And I won't be surprised to see England dumped out this time around. And yeah, I won't be surprised to even see Philippines go on a run, or one of the Asian countries like Japan go on a run, like you say, as well. They've got Scotland in the first round, but then they potentially run into Wales. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting weekend, but I'd say either Wales or the Netherlands. I'm currently sticking my neck out and saying Wales alongside you, but Netherlands for me are number 2 at the moment in this competition.
Yeah, very interesting 3 days of darts in prospect. Of course, no crowd, unfortunately, this year for the World Cup of Darts, but plenty of nations will be hoping for a World Cup win come Sunday evening. The start of not the start. We've had, of course, the European Championships, but a busy period of darts with the Winter Series, the Grand Slam Players Championships, and then just a couple of weeks in between until we get to the World Championships. And we're looking forward to it all. I mean, there's so much darts coming up at the moment, and we can't wait to see it all unfold, and we'll have it all here on Darts News Weekly. Thank you very much for joining me, Sam, and we'll see you soon.